This is a Net News Network headline news brought to you by the Behind the Line podcast, bringing you all the crazy, chaotic news from around the United States and the world. Tune in to what you won't hear the MSN talking about. They just want to keep you fat, dumb, and happy, folks. I'm looking through I just Googled news today for the U.S. to see what, if there's any headlines, and almost all of it is just entertainment. Actors doing this and that, sports people doing this and that. They just don't want you to know what's going on. There's some stuff about the stock market, but mostly they don't want to tell you about the important stuff, the important things that are going on right now in this country and the world. Things that should matter to you. Not this garbage, not this entertainment crap, sports crap, the first woman to referee a Super Bowl. It's insane to me that this isn't news. This is entertainment. This is to keep you quiet, to keep you satisfied, to keep making you think that everything is okay, and it's not. You've got to go out there and dig if you want to find out what's really going on and what things matter or should matter to you, so you can make informed decisions about how to proceed with your day-to-day. The media should be holding people accountable. That is their job. That is their job, to monitor the government and hold them accountable and let you know what's going on. We have things going on all around the world that is going to affect the United States. Economic problems, supply chain problems. And while I don't think you should focus on these things entirely all the time, you need to know what's going on. Don't fall asleep. Stay vigilant. Dig for information so you can be aware of what's going on. Situational awareness does not apply to just what's going on in your immediate vicinity. Anything coming that could affect you or your family, you should be aware of and you should be watching for. And it's getting increasingly harder to find that information. Don't be the typical fat, dumb, and happy American. Inform yourself. So by now we've all seen the balloon dramatics that played out over the last week in the U.S., where Biden let this Chinese balloon fly itself across Alaska, down into the Midwest, and over to the East Coast, and didn't do anything about it until there was outcry from the public and the media questioning why they were allowing this to go on. What you may not know is that in 2018, China tested a balloon that carried 3 hypersonic nuclear missiles on it. This is a report from the Epoch Times. Chinese state-owned television aired footage of a high-altitude balloon dropping hypersonic weapons in 2018. The stunning footage displays a high-altitude balloon not dissimilar from the one that traversed over the United States last week, carrying 3 hypersonic glide vehicles into high altitude and dropping them for testing. Chinese state broadcaster CCTV reported on the weapons test in September 2018. The footage has since been deleted from Chinese media, but photographs and short clips can still be found online. Paul Crespo, president of the Center for American Defense Studies, said that the balloon which traversed U.S. airspace this week could absolutely be a dry run for an attack using a balloon-mounted weapon, but that hypersonic missiles would likely not be a first choice for China's communist regime. While China has tested hypersonic missiles launched from balloons in the past, that isn't a likely use for these airships, Crespo told the Epoch Times in an email. The biggest threat is sending one or more of these high-altitude balloons over the U.S. with a small nuclear EMP device. Detonated at extremely high altitude, they could knock out power and communications across the U.S., wreaking widespread havoc for a year or more without firing a shot on the ground. Communist China is not alone in developing novel ways to use high-altitude balloons as weapons of war. The U.S. has researched and tested the use of such balloons for deploying swarms of explosive-laden suicide drones since at least 2018. The Pentagon is also investing tens of millions of dollars into high-altitude balloons that it intends to use for surveillance and notably hopes to use to track the CCP's hypersonic arsenal. This, along with everything else China is doing right now, stockpiling food, stockpiling gold and precious metals, and now this, all seem to be pointing in a very bad direction. The U.S. military has not shot anything down over U.S. soil since World War II, when it shot down a Japanese jet over the Akutan Islands in Alaska in July of 1942. So basically the Chinese now know they can enter our airspace for up to a week and do whatever they want before the U.S. government will take action. Because the U.S. government, present administration, is afraid to let the American people know about things like that are going on. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken also canceled his trip to China at the last minute. He called it an irresponsible act and referred to it as a clear violation of U.S. sovereignty and international law. Blinken, who had been due to depart Washington for Beijing last Friday, said he had told senior Chinese diplomat Wang Yi in a phone call that sending the balloon over the U.S. was an irresponsible act and that China's decision to take this action on the eve of his visit is detrimental to the substantive discussions that they were preparing to have. China, for its part, said Saturday that President Biden's decision to shoot down the spy balloon that crossed America was an excessive reaction and that it retains the right to respond further. China claims that its balloon was a civilian airship and not the spy device the U.S. claimed it to be, and said that the U.S.'s decision to destroy the property seriously violates international convention. In these circumstances, for the United States to insist on using armed force is clearly an excessive reaction that seriously violates international convention, the statement said. China will resolutely defend the legitimate rights and interests of the enterprise involved and retains the right to respond further. Are these people on crack? Crossing over our airspace violates international law. They had no right to fly that thing over the U.S. We had every right to shoot it down, and it should have been shot down in the second that it crossed into U.S. airspace in Alaska. Yes, the Chinese have satellites and that to do their spying with, but this was some sort of test. They didn't do this for no reason. And with everything else going on, this had a purpose. And it's not a good purpose. Just more reasons that you should be preparing for whatever is coming. And I don't know if you saw the story about the explosion in the sky in Billings, Montana. This was just hours after the Chinese spy balloon was reported. A lady filmed an explosion in the sky and something fairly large falling from the sky with a smoke trail behind it. She said that she heard a jet go by really fast and then the explosion. When she heard the jet go by, that's when she got her phone out, filmed. It's unclear what the object was, since the spy balloon was reportedly in Missouri by this time. Missouri is where the country's only B-2 bomber base is located. But what happened in Montana? It's not coincidence. There is no coincidences. So was there more than one balloon? Initially, I heard there were 3 balloons over the U.S., and that seemed to disappear after a short period of time. But was there another one that got shot down by a jet? Nobody is saying what this was. And the government is not going to tell us, because even when this was going on, a reporter asked the Pentagon spokesman if we had a right to know, if people had a right to know about this balloon. And his response was, the public certainly has the ability to look up in the sky and see where the balloon is, and he would not give any other information. This government, our government, is just full of lies, corruption, and deceit. That's it. That's all you're going to get. Well, while all this balloon stuff was going on, the Biden administration has approved another $2.1 billion in military aid package to strengthen Ukraine's air defense arsenal. The package includes $425 million in arms and equipment drawn from existing U.S. stockpiles, as well as $1.75 billion in Ukraine Assistance Security Initiative funds, which Ukraine can use to purchase new weapons, particularly those related to air defense from manufacturers contracted with the U.S. Department of Defense. In Friday's announcement, the Pentagon said the package includes critical air defense capabilities to help Ukraine defend its people. In total, the United States has now committed $30 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration, the Pentagon said, noting that the United States has sent more than $32 billion in military aid to Ukraine since 2014 Crimea crisis and more than $29.3 billion since last February, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Meanwhile, the economy here at home continues to fall apart, and we are sending all this money and all this hardware to the Ukraine, while China is probing our country. To add to this, there's a report out that says the U.S. would likely run out of critical munitions during a major conflict with China's communist regime due to its inability to adequately mobilize the defense industrial base, according to this report. The report, entitled Empty Bins in a Wartime Environment, examines how the United States has depleted key arms reserves by supplying Ukraine's resistance against Russia's invasion, and extrapolates how a similar situation could negatively impact the nation in a wartime scenario. In a major conflict such as a war with China in the Taiwan Strait, the U.S. use of munitions would likely exceed the current stockpiles of the U.S. Department of Defense, leading to a problem of empty bins. Empty bins follows closely behind the release of results from a CSIS war games, which found that the United States would suffer from low levels of vital munitions in a war with China over the continued de facto independence of Taiwan. The war game found that Japan and the United States could likely defeat the invasion of Taiwan by Communist China, but only at great cost in lives and material. In such a conflict, the United States would likely run out of long-range anti-ship missiles early on. The report notes that the United States has sent more Stinger missiles to Ukraine in the last year than have been built for all non-U.S. customers over the last 20 years. Likewise, the nation has delivered more than 1 million 155mm artillery rounds to Ukraine and only placed orders to replace a fraction of that amount. Sounds about right for old Biden. The report goes on to say the problem rests in the United States' sluggish procurement process and lack of a robust defense industrial base for munitions manufacturing. The Javelin surface-to-air missile system, for example, requires a production lead time of approximately 30 months. This means that if the United States were to order new units of the system today, it would take more than 2 years before they were in the hands of the military. Notably, such slow estimates are what is achievable in peacetime. During war, procurement could take much longer when supply chains are disrupted and vital components like rare earth elements are scarce. So while all this new information is coming out about vaccine damage and other countries are pulling back on requiring shots and boosters, the U.S. is still pushing right on forward. A bill in consideration in the Maryland legislature would allow healthcare providers to vaccinate children without their parent or guardian's consent, so long as they feel the child is able to understand the benefits and potential consequences of getting vaccinated. The bill, introduced in the Maryland State Senate, says a minor who is at least 14 years old has the same capacity as an adult to consent to vaccination. The bill further states minors under the age of 14, including a minor who is developmentally disabled or unemancipated, has the capacity to consent to vaccination if, in the opinion of the healthcare provider, the minor is of sufficient intelligence to understand and appreciate the need for, nature of, and the significant risks and consequences of the vaccination, and the minor is able to give informed consent. While the bill states a minor over the age of 14 has the same decision-making ability as an adult when it comes to choosing to get a vaccine, it also states that if the parent or guardian has decided to vaccinate their minor child, then that child cannot refuse the vaccine. The law specifically states that the capacity of a minor to consent to vaccination under this section does not include the capacity to refuse vaccination for which a parent or guardian has given consent. Democratic State Senator Cheryl Kagan introduced the bill on Wednesday. The bill is set to go before a hearing in the Senate Finance Committee on February 22nd. This is absolute insanity. Kid is old enough to decide on their own they want it, but not old enough to refuse it. No 14-year-old should be deciding something like that without their parents' consent. These things should not be required anyway. Kagan is not the first lawmaker to introduce legislation to allow healthcare providers to vaccinate children without the knowledge or consent of their parents. Connecticut State Representative Kevin Ryan introduced a bill that would allow children 12 years of age and older to receive a vaccination without the consent of a parent or guardian. 41 states require individuals to be at least 18 to consent on their own to vaccination, according to Kaiser Family Foundation. Nebraska individuals must be at least 19. 3 states allow minors to consent to vaccination at 16, and 1 allows minors to consent at 15. 4 other states have no specific age cutoff, allowing medical providers to simply waive consent at their discretion. California and Philadelphia are among the states that allow individuals to consent when they are 18, though San Francisco allows minors that are 12 years old or older to consent, and Philadelphia allows minors who are 11 years old or older to consent. The District of Columbia also passed a law in 2021 that allowed 11-year-olds to consent to vaccination on their own. A federal judge blocked that law, finding it violated parental religious liberty and ability to monitor their children for adverse effects. You think? The district then refined the law, allowing emancipated or homeless minors to consent to vaccination. A DC health care provider can also vaccinate a consenting 11-year-old so long as they've made a reasonable attempt to notify a parent or legal guardian. This is absolute insanity, the way they are pushing these things like this. These kids should not be making decisions like that, and they know it. 11-year-olds can't vote. 12-year-olds can't vote. 14 years, 15, 16, 17 years old, you can't vote. But you can go ahead and decide, without telling your parents, that you're going to get some untested shot that is proving to be hurting people more than it's helping, possibly causing lifelong medical problems. Parents have every right to know and make that decision. That is not the government's position to make these decisions. It's not a doctor's decision. It's not somebody that works at a school's decision. It is the parents' decision. Those kids belong to their parents, not the government. The fact that this is allowed is sick and disgusting in this country. And these doctors who are going along with it are violating their oath. And while the government seems bent on shooting up your kids with every vaccine possible, with or without your knowledge, it has been revealed that children of illegal immigrants were given the green light to go to school in New York City despite not being able to provide proof that they have received any of the childhood vaccinations mandatory for other students. The revelation exhibits just one of the many issues the city has had to deal with as officials struggle to accommodate the unprecedented number of illegal migrants that have arrived in recent months. According to the New York Post, since the summer of 2022, an estimated 11,000 migrant children have been enrolled in schools operated by the city's Department of Education. In New York City, students in kindergarten to grade 5 are required to be vaccinated against diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis B, and chickenpox. Many parents have expressed concern that the lack of vaccinations could lead to outbreaks of entirely preventable diseases. As the New York Post reports, Simon Barrack Middle School in Manhattan recently reported a case of chickenpox, after which one parent stated that 5 migrant children were absent for the following few days. DOE policy states as of September 2022 that asylum-seeking children cannot be denied entry in city schools even if their parents can't prove that they've been vaccinated. They are given 30 days from their enrollment to provide evidence of vaccinations or be in the process of acquiring vaccinations. What is this weird double standard we have in this country that seems to the laws only seem to apply to law-abiding, tax-paying U.S. citizens? Criminals get special treatment, illegal aliens get special treatment. The rest of us have to follow all the rules or be punished for not doing that, while all these other people get a pass. They get to do whatever they want. We are quickly headed down the path to being a third world country. This stuff needs to stop. The law applies to anybody in this country, not just the tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. Well, we all see the writing on the wall with the economy, and what are you doing to protect yourself going forward? Silver and gold historically have always held their value. This is a good way to hedge your financial security in the future. You can go to Silver Gold Bull to buy gold, silver, platinum, and other products with over 286,000 5-star reviews. This is where I get my silver from. Silver is the most popular precious metal to invest in, as the cost per ounce is dramatically lower than other metals. Buying silver online is a smarter, more reliable way to diversify your financial portfolio. Additionally, investing in physical silver and gold are the only assets that are completely free of counterparty risk and have historically held their purchasing power. For more information or to purchase your silver or gold, you can visit my website, behindthelinepodcast.com, and follow the link to silvergoldbull.com. Protect your financial future today. The rollout of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines should be immediately suspended, as they are causing an unprecedented level of harm, including the death of young people and children, said Recep Levi, a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This is not a theory anymore, the professor told the Epoch Times, referring to findings that link the messenger RNA vaccines with myocarditis, a potentially fatal inflammation of the heart. These are proven facts that basically undermine any sense of safety about these vaccines. For more than 30 years, Levi has worked extensively in the areas of analytics and modeling, looking at risk management issues in the context of health systems and health policies, mainly analyzing data sets to see what they reveal about aspects like quality, safety, and risks. In a video statement he shared Monday on Twitter, Levi said he has now seen a substantial amount of evidence that the risk of dying from myocarditis triggered by mRNA vaccines is outweighing the benefits that those vaccines have to offer. At this point in time, all COVID mRNA vaccination programs should stop immediately, he said in the 6.5-minute video statement, which went viral with at least 1.5 million views in just a day. By now, I believe that the cumulative evidence is conclusive and confirms our concern that the mRNA vaccines indeed cause sudden cardiac arrest as a sequel of vaccine-induced myocarditis, and this is potentially only one mechanism by which they cause harm. The professor said, pointing to his analysis of the Israel National Emergency Services data, which suggested a 25% increase in the cause of cardiac arrest diagnosis among Israeli youth in the first half of 2021, exactly when the government launched a massive vaccination campaign. Data from the UK, Scotland, and Australia replicate the data from Israel. But this is just some guy from MIT, just one of the smartest people in the country. Who should listen to him, right? Let's just keep vaccinating these little kids at school without their parents knowing. And to top this all off, the whole Project Veritas information dump of these Pfizer doctors explaining just exactly what the purpose of these vaccines is and what they're doing in their labs. But the U.S. is just going to keep pushing this stuff. They're talking about making an mRNA flu shot, too. They're talking about combining all these vaccines and boosters into one shot that you'll get every year. All this evidence is just being ignored. These people should go to jail. And these government agencies that forced people to get vaccines to work or do whatever else should be sued. They should be sued out of existence. How long are we going to let this go before we hold these people accountable for what they've done to hundreds of thousands of people? The CDC has admitted to overcounting the number of COVID-19 hospitalizations. The U.S. government overcounts COVID-19 hospitalizations, according to officials with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, but the agency suggested that it doesn't overcount deaths. No, we just lie about hospitalizations, not deaths. Okay. COVID-19 hospitalizations listed on the CDC's data tracker webpage, which is utilized by a wide variety of health officials, journalists, and others, include 3 types of hospitalizations, the CDC said in January 27th statement. Types of hospitalization because of COVID-19, because of a non-COVID condition that was likely made worse by COVID-19, and because of non-COVID reasons after testing positive for COVID-19. The latter is known as an incidental hospitalization. They combine all of these into one number. Experts are increasingly warning against putting forth numbers that include incidental hospitalizations or hospitalization with COVID-19 as opposed to for COVID-19. They say that separating the incidental hospitalizations will improve the accuracy of numbers and help the public better understand the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic. No kidding. Is there anything that this particular administration and government in general don't lie to us about? And it seems to be mostly Democratic administrations as far as this COVID stuff goes that just continually lie to the people about what exactly is going on. Again, when are these people going to be held accountable for their lies and what they've done to the American people. A group of mayors in New Jersey have called for an immediate moratorium on offshore wind farms after at least 18 whales have washed up dead on the U.S. East Coast in recent months. In a letter to New Jersey congressional lawmakers, the mayors said they stand united in their concerns about the unprecedented number of whales that have washed ashore recently. They called for an immediate moratorium on all offshore wind activities, a key part of New Jersey's climate change strategy, until federal and state agencies can investigate the deaths and confidently determine that offshore wind activities are not contributing to them. On January 12th, the seventh dead whale in 38 days washed ashore in Brigantine, New Jersey. The unprecedented number of whale standings coincides with ongoing activity from acoustic survey vessels for the development of offshore wind, the letter dated January 30th reads. This is happening in New York as well. Despite the recent whale deaths, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said last month that the state won't be pausing offshore wind development, although the Democratic governor said the deaths were tragic. According to an NOAA study that began in 2016 looking into the rising number of humpback whale deaths along the Atlantic coast from Maine through Florida, 180 whale strandings have been reported, of which 24 were in New Jersey and 35 in New York. Once again, Democrats call for these drastic changes without any plan in place, any studies in place to know what sort of effects these things will have on the environment or people in general. It's always these big ideas and big plans with no implementation, no real plan behind the idea, just their little crazy rainbows and unicorns ideas. No way to actually implement and make them work. And now this is possibly killing all these whales, and all these people who claim to love the environment so much don't care. Big surprise. Another major problem we're having in this country is with drugs. The open border that allows these drugs, especially fentanyl, to flow into the country, and none of these Democrats seem to want to do anything about it. Here in Seattle, in the last 12 months, the Seattle Fire Department has responded to 5,200 overdoses. That's 14 overdoses a day, just in the city of Seattle. And I know that Seattle is not the worst city in the country for drug overdoses, so this is going on across the country. And yet, all these deaths from overdoses, and what is the government doing about that? Nothing. They're so concerned about you catching a cold that they force you to get a shot to go to work. But they could care less about all this dope coming across the border and killing hundreds of thousands of people in this country every year. Just think about that. 14 overdoses a day in a city of about 800,000 people. That's insane. And yet, government officials in this city continue to try to legalize this behavior, legalize drugs, lower consequences for having drugs, allow drug use anywhere on the streets of the city that they want to do it. Nothing gets done. And you've got all the additional things that go along with drug use, mainly crime and homelessness, which you're seeing an explosion of in these cities, big cities, all cities across the country. Mostly blue cities, it seems. Because these Democrats just don't care. They just want a free-for-all. They want complete chaos. And they're getting it. They continue passing laws making it easier for criminals to commit crimes and not be held accountable and not serve any time. And nobody is held accountable. The politicians aren't. The judges aren't. The prosecutors aren't. The city councilors. The mayors. It's not safe to walk around the streets of Seattle. In the middle of the day, you could be struck by some crazed homeless lunatic with a hammer in your head because he wants to steal your bag, when there's cops sitting directly across the street. Yeah, this happened just a couple weeks ago in Seattle, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, by Pike Place Market. Guy hits another guy in the head with a hammer and kills him so he can steal his bag. We've had nurses coming home from work assaulted by homeless people, thrown down the stairs of the light rail station repeatedly by a guy who's had over 40 arrests. When will these people be held accountable? When are we going to take our streets back? It wasn't like this in the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. But they would have you believe somehow we're living in the best times. Look around. Does this look like the best times to you? Here's a win for gun owners. A federal law prohibiting marijuana users from possessing firearms is unconstitutional, a federal judge in Oklahoma has concluded, citing last year's U.S. Supreme Court ruling that significantly expanded gun rights. U.S. District Judge Patrick Wyrick, an appointee of former Republican President Donald Trump in Oklahoma City, on Friday dismissed an indictment against a man charged in August with violating that ban, saying it infringed his right to bear arms under the U.S. Constitution's Second Amendment. Wyrick said that while the government can protect the public from dangerous people possessing guns, it could not argue Jared Harrison's mere status as a user of marijuana justifies stripping him of his fundamental right to possess a firearm. He said using marijuana was not in and of itself a violent, forceful, or threatening act, and noted that Oklahoma is one of a number of states where the drug, still illegal under federal law, can be legally bought for medical users. I talked about this before. They're going to come after the people with green cards. They're going to come after people that take medication for psychiatric problems. These are all going to be reasons for them to take your guns away. They've got to look for these little reasons more and more. We'll see how long this stands. I'm sure this will be challenged by the federal government. In January, the U.S. Marine Corps opened its first new base in 70 years on Guam, an island equidistant between Japan and Taiwan, to allow American troops to act if China makes a move on Taiwan, according to media reports. The 4,000-acre base, formerly known as Camp Blas, will house approximately 5,000 Marines and comes as the U.S. is seeking to reorganize troop presence in the Pacific to bolster deterrence against China. It will eventually serve as a training hub for Marines aiming to guard allies, critical sea lanes, and Pacific islands in the event of a Chinese invasion. The U.S. and Japan agreed on January 11th to restructure the Marine Corps force stationed in Okinawa, giving them more firepower and the ability to quickly respond as China readies for a potential offensive against Taiwan. A new strategy will arm the roughly 18,000 Marines deployed to Okinawa with missiles that can reach the Chinese mainland and increase their maneuverability if they are called upon to defend Taiwan. Tell me that Chinese balloon was nothing. Tell me that the U.S. government isn't preparing for something with China. This isn't stuff that gets reported in mainstream. These are things that you need to be aware of that are going on. Why doesn't the media talk about this stuff? They want to keep you more interested in Grammys and football. Thank you for listening to Net News Network Headline News, brought to you by the Behind the Line podcast. For more, you can listen to us at the BehindTheLinePodcast.com or right here on Net News Network. We can also be found on Facebook, YouTube, Truth Social, Parler, Gab, Twitter, Telegram, Reddit, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, and anywhere else your favorite podcasts are found. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe and share.